he outsmarted Lando Norris as well, you know.
Let me tell you, when Antonelli gets that first win,
Carlos Sainz made a huge step forward. Tonda, we have had a banger. I think we have predicted that right. Bahrain Grand Prix just delivered the best race of the season so far. What are your thoughts? I mean, it was chaotic at times. It was because of the graphics, right? We didn't have any timings for a while. But the racing was finally there. What do you say to the Bahrain Grand Prix? How did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we got what we missed in Suzuka, and with some dividends, because that was some crazy on-track action. There was like every single lap you had battles for, it all up and, well, not really at the front that much, but in the midfield. Oh my God, all the rookies were getting involved. Yuki Tsunoda in his second race at Red Bull, scoring points at the end, also making some moves. And yeah, as you say, we didn't really see a lot of the action in terms of the timings, which was very, very frustrating. And this has been a thing since the start of the season. I don't know what's going on there, but because we know that George Russell's transponder got messed up, which is why we saw him drop to the bottom of the timings. But I feel like, having the commentators explain that would have been a better solution rather than not having the timings at all, because I'm watching an Alpine fight a Williams or whoever, and I have no idea what position it's for. I have, I can, I guess, ascertain which car it is, but still, it's how far are they from the people behind them? How far are they from the people in front of them? It shows a bit annoying.
Exactly, but, unless you have the live timings, Which I'm not sure. I didn't use it in that race. I'm not sure if there was an issue with them as well. But the TV direction, it was a little bit strange because I think the directors didn't choose some particular overtakes. For example, you had, two cars coming really close towards the lead. Not obviously for the lead, because Oscar Piastri absolutely destroyed everybody this weekend. But it seemed like there was so much to choose from, so it is easy to just, choose any battle. Maybe, you're looking at Antonelli trying to fight his way back.
Yep.
And sending it with the balls of steel. But yeah, I mean, George Russell seemed to have all the check engine lights on in the race, opening his DRS for a split second, which haven't seen that quite in a while. Even I think Norris, it was who was getting the radio message at some point that he needs to be absolutely sure that he's behind Russell within the second to use DRS, which, it's quite difficult to judge. It
was a race full of very strange technical errors.
Yeah,
because not only George Russell, but also the Red Bull pit stop light that caused
that is
both of the Red Bulls. I mean, I feel like it was a bit forgotten later because it happened during the first pit stop, but then. We saw both Max Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda suffer quite a lot because of that. Because also the field was so bunched up, so any extra second spent in the pit lane meant that you were, falling down the order. And they were having a decent race before that, and then you stop, and then you don't know if you can go because the light is just not turning green. But
yeah, absolutely, so much time lost. And speaking of the pit stops, right? Like Red Bull, the once absolutely top dog in terms of the speed of their pit stops, consistency of their pit stops, had a shocking weekend when it comes to the pit stops, right? Like, not only did the lights not work twice, Tsunoda and Verstappen, but also Verstappen had an issue, right? So he had like a 5-second stop. So yeah, quite a difficult weekend for the Red Bulls, right?
Yeah.
So,
but actually also with the TV direction, I don't know if you caught it, but they have some new angles that they're using, some very cool new camera placements, because at one point there was a camera, like a bird's eye view of a corner, and you could see it was when Hamilton and Leclerc were fighting Norris, and it was very cool because you could see them getting into the corner and then accelerating, because usually we see them from an angle, but to see them right from above, and I feel like in the last few races as well, there have been some very cool new places that they're showing the action from.
it is finally getting to the point that we've been mentioning and hyping up all last season and hyping up all of the start of this season. It's finally been very interesting to watch. Overtakes made, strategy calls. Man, we didn't even mention the strategy. The strategy, it was incredible because not only you had 2 or more stops, right? Almost at one point, it seemed that there's going to be a 3-stop, right? For the likes of Max Verstappen, Kimi Antonelli.
Yeah.
And, one might wonder how many stops they could have made without the safety car, right? But even on the race start, you had the top 10, all starting on the soft tires, bar one team only, going for the Bravo strategy, and that, of course, was the Ferrari team, which I don't know how you felt, but it gave me chills for the first few laps, but I had a feeling, I had a feeling that it might turn out to be pretty good, but the first stint was a bit of a struggle, especially on the start for Leclerc, and were you nervous as a Ferrari fan?
Well, I mean, when are you not nervous as a Ferrari fan is the question. But yeah, I feel like Hamilton and Leclerc kind of had opposite races in a way, because Hamilton clawed his way up from P9 up to P5 with some help from the safety car, but even got driver of the day for it. But Leclerc, on the other hand, was having a very eventful race, obviously getting overtaken by both George Russell and Lando Norris in the first corner, which was unfortunate, but, kind of, you could see that coming, given the fact that he was starting on the medium tire. But then the strategy, I mean, could they have gone for a 1-stop? Maybe. I do think that probably they would have been got by at the end because they were losing quite a lot of time. But the hard tire was just not it.
Exactly.
We saw it with the Red Bulls. They saw it, they saw the warning signs. I don't think there was any other options that they really had. I mean,
well, honestly, like if you're speaking after safety car, could have gone for softs,
they could have gone for softs, but then you have to pit again, very likely. Because
hindsight is a beautiful thing, because I think even George Russell didn't expect to make it last, in those last, 23, 24 laps on the softs.
Even
but
defending from Lando Norris at the
with
very
the
end.
issues he had.
With the issues he had. No, but Leclerc, I feel like, Ferrari had a very mixed bag of a weekend, showing that, there is some progress. The new floor did do something. The qualifying, getting it up into P3 and then starting from the front row. The car is a bit better, it seems like. Or at least more manageable, but there's still, as we saw, a lot of room for improvement, especially in terms of the balance. Leclerc was not very happy after the race. As obviously you don't want to end up P4 after you've been defending with your whole life, and there were some very nice moves, by the way, defensive, and the lunge on Lando Norris, which we saw, very cool, and then Hamilton as well. What did you make of that whole battle?
Yeah, that was. I mean, I knew deep down that the two Ferraris being on the hard tires. The McLaren starting off, it's a faster car, and it's, I think, Oscar in the hands of Oscar Piastri, it's been proved. But it seems like with the lack of top speed and maybe a bit of difficulty to follow, it's not the best car, perhaps, to make your way up.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Norris was on the mediums, right? And both the Ferraris were on the hard. So, despite enjoying the cooperation between our two beautiful teammates, I just knew that it was coming, I was hoping, and maybe I thought for a second that perhaps the medium tires would kind of go off, or at least there would be a crossover, between the hard and the medium tire. But it seemed like the hard tire was not the one to be on. So, yeah, beautiful moves. I think, Lando Norris having to give the place back was a curveball as well. I thought Leclerc could run away a little bit, and maybe Hamilton would just try and make his life more difficult, but it was insanely difficult to keep that McLaren behind. But I think, it's been a very eventful race. It kept you on the edge all the time because I don't know if you noticed, the gaps between the cars.
Yeah.
It was insane. Like, you had the train where Antonelli was. It was like from P10 all the way to, I don't know, P14 perhaps, where you had all different cars. You had Behrman, going from the last place to P10. And Ocon, who binned it in the qualifying, he absolutely smashed his car and managed to bring the car in the points. So has double points. That was not on my bingo card for the Bahrain Grand Prix.
Let's not forget that.
Yeah, my prediction is 1 race late.
Yeah.
Even the final team to score points.
Jack Doohan also putting on some show.
Yeah. Great drive by him.
A great drive after the crash and that we saw before. But he didn't end up in the points, but still, like, the qualifying by both of the Alpine cars, very strong.
Yeah, especially Pierre Gasly. I mean, we have to, mention his performance. I mean, he qualified on the grid. He started P4 because of the Mercedes penalty. Both Mercedes cars got a penalty, 1 place grid penalty, after going out too early from their box, or from their pit lane.
Yeah,
it was a bit. I don't know. That was a bit strange because I don't know how I feel about it yet, but it's just I don't see how much of an advantage they got. I mean, they did get ahead of, I think, the Saubers, who are at the end of the pit lane, so they could get out on the track quicker. But yeah, maybe 1 place grid penalty is a little bit too harsh, especially when you consider, Nico Hülkenberg, another good example. He made it to Q2. He knocked out Alex Albon. But then later, after qualifying, the stewards found out that he was actually over the track limits and he got demoted. So that was, there was many different, games being played.
A lot of penalties.
Some wizardry.
A lot of
penalties. A lot of penalties. Especially also mentioning Lando Norris.
Yep.
Right? Like, his start and the fact that actually Verstappen managed to see that he was out of the, his grid box.
Nothing escapes Verstappen's eyes.
Absolutely. Always watching, eye on the game. So, yeah, it was just so eventful, I think, all around, It was strategy, there was safety car, which was, a
bit strange, right?
Yeah.
I think we can agree.
Would you have
on
expected a VSC instead of?
I think so. Because I'm not even. What was the debris from?
It was from. Wasn't it from Carlos Sainz?
Carlos Sainz
maybe?
was missing a piece of his side. Yeah, but I wonder. Yeah, interesting. I don't know if it was in an unfortunate location on the track, maybe, but a full safety car seemed a bit excessive. But it did help Hamilton, so can't complain too much. But
fair enough.
Also, very lucky for Piastri to be in the right spot at the right time, at the very end of the track, so he could peel right into the pits. But yeah, I mean, we haven't mentioned Piastri too much, but he really had a great weekend overall, just dominating the race. I mean, he was, for most of the race, he still had Russell and Norris not too far behind, a couple of seconds, but then towards the end of the last stint, it was like 6 seconds ahead, even more maybe. So at times, if he made a mistake, if he would have made a mistake, they probably would have been right at his tail, but he didn't.
Exactly. He was flawless. And that is also considering the qualifying, right? Like, he put it on pole, and Lando Norris was...
It was actually 15 seconds at the end.
Yeah, 15 I think he had 7 seconds at the start. Until the safety car, he managed to build a 7-second gap. And then he finished ahead by like 16 seconds. It was insane. But yeah, even the qualifying performance, right? Like, Piastri was on it pretty much from Q1 till the end. And Norris, a bit of a surprise, right? Like, he was around half a second off in qualifying, which is very unusual because Lando Norris is very strong in qualifying. But it seems like this car, maybe when it's on the edge, it doesn't seem to suit him at the moment.
But now, we kind of talked about this last time, but due to how the race panned out, well, there was a chance that Piastri would be leading the championship now, but he's 3 points, 3 championship points behind his teammate Lando Norris, and that is not a lot. that is not a big gap, as we know, especially, after 4 races.
Yeah.
So I think we can expect some very interesting development on this, because as we saw, Lando Norris also makes a mistake every once in a while. I mean, I'm sure that in the next few races we will see the balance shift a bit back, towards Norris, and he'll have a great weekend. But I would not be surprised if we saw Piastri ahead in the championship in the coming races. And I mean, we can't also forget that Max Verstappen is not too far back with 69 points.
Exactly, and that's
8 points back.
That's my point, like, how the hell is Verstappen still in the fight, right? And that's, I think, a prime example of the fact where you have 2 number 1 drivers.
Yeah,
they're taking points away from each other, essentially. But to argue back, I don't think there was a chance either way to really, they had like what, they had 1-2 finish.
Yeah.
Well, that was in China. In Australia, it didn't pan out as great. And in Suzuka, obviously didn't as well. But yeah, Verstappen had a shocking weekend. And, he's been asked a lot about the championship, and he said that he's not fighting in the championship. He's just participating. But, he's just not many, it's race 4, right? But still, it's not in any race. The Red Bull was not the fastest car in any race.
Yeah.
And yet he's still within, I think 7 points, even less, of the championship leader. And I think that Verstappen had a shocking Grand Prix, qualifying didn't go as planned for him. The race, wasn't great as well. The pit stops, the stint on the hards, that one was horrible. Lasted only a few laps. He could not, for God, get past Esteban Ocon, who just blocked the hell out of Verstappen in that Haas. And yeah, it just seemed like
getting overtaken by Kimi Antonelli as well.
Absolutely,
who was pulling out some insane moves, some lunges, and David Coulthard was very excited in the commentary box about the
not
bravery
surprised.
of the young Italian.
Yeah, and Verstappen was last at one point, which we didn't see for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, especially after, him either winning or DNFing, as as we saw in the past 2 seasons. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I guess that's just how it will be this season. Max Verstappen, he'll probably, when he can, he'll snatch a win, if on tracks that favor Red Bull, but otherwise he'll have to get used to being a bit lower down the order and having to fight these inferior quote unquote cars such as the Haas of Esteban Ocon, which by any reasonable imagination should not be fighting a Red Bull after knowing everything we've seen the past few years. But times change. Times change.
Exactly. And as you spoke about Antonelli as well, I think he had a very unlucky race.
Yeah.
In the fact that he pitted just a few laps before the safety car has come out. So he got quite shafted and he had to come through the field, essentially. He did not manage to score points, but I don't know. He was, he's getting more comfortable in the car. And, the move on Verstappen, that was, I think, confidence setting, to say the least. His late moves into turn 1 where he almost outbraked himself. It was great to see, somebody who's just courageous, so young, speed is there. And I think he was one of the only ones that was taking a few turns very differently. He has a very unique driving style. Many
very
say
wide.
that. Yeah,
very wide.
Using the curves a lot, like
also
Hamilton
getting the black and white flag for track limits as a result of that. But
that is true.
I think we also still remember the first race of 2021 where Lewis Hamilton went over the track limits like 40 times.
Yeah, exactly. That was the race in 2021. It was the first one that kicked the war off. But yeah, that exactly as you mentioned.
So Bahrain is
Bahrain
is very popular
Bahrain.
for that.
The thing is, I think in that turn is at least that time in 2021, it was the fact that when you were racing, you could go outside the track, right? You could go in your regular laps. You could go outside, the track limits. However, if you were to overtake, that was not the case. So even though Hamilton went off like 40 or 50 times, he was right to do so, but then Verstappen overtaking outside the track limits was against the rules, which resulted him in giving the place back. But yeah, sometimes Formula One is very, law-like. It's very difficult to judge and very difficult to interpret certain words. But yeah, I think that at least this time and this race, the track limits were not really the talking point because that got rightly overshadowed by the amazing racing that was done. But somebody who maybe had a lot more hopes for the race was Carlos Sainz. We touched upon him a little bit, but he outqualified Albon, and he got into Q3. He outqualified Hamilton, and he got his elbows out in the start. He pushed Hamilton off, making him lose place to Verstappen as well. And, it seemed like Carlos Sainz was, he forgot that he was not in a Ferrari anymore. So that was he had a solid race until, very unfortunate, he started to make contact with a few more cars. I think Yuki Tsunoda, was one of the cars that touched him. Then he outbraked himself, and I think he made contact with Antonelli as well. And it resulted in him in having a huge hole in the side pod. And he had to retire the car, unfortunately. And not only that, he didn't serve his 10-second penalty, meaning that it carries over and he has a 3-place grid penalty for Saudi Arabia. James Vowles, I'm disappointed. You should have calculated that out.
Yeah, I mean, he could have just probably couldn't have, or one more. But yeah, pretty unfortunate for William. So Albon also not having the best of weekends. Getting out of in Q1, wasn't it? Yeah, getting out qualified by. I mean, Nico Hülkenberg, who got. Yeah, we already mentioned the lap times getting deleted and reinstated. But yeah, Williams were probably hoping for something a bit better, as was Liam Lawson, I think, who also didn't have the best of races, also getting a penalty.
Exactly. Liam Lawson, yeah.
Yuki Tsunoda was having a better time than last time around at his home race, because he did outqualify the VCarb, which is for
good for him.
The second Red Bull driver outqualified the VCarbs for the first time this season, which is a pretty funny statistic, I think about it. But yeah, his race also pretty affected by the pit stop problems. But he was doing pretty well for himself. Apart from that,
Tsunoda had a good weekend.
He had a good weekend. He scored points, his first points for Red Bull. It's also a pretty significant milestone, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're just gonna, also the strike wasn't very good for Red Bull overall, but maybe we'll see him, I think we'll see more of Tsunoda in the top 10, which is probably not a very bold prediction, but after last week, I think some people were having some doubts.
Yeah. I mean, Tsunoda had, I think if you look at his race, he was really trying to stay out of trouble.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a great approach. He was just trying to bag the points and get the miles in. Because you could see that when he was battling cars, he was cautious. You would know that if he was in that VCarb, he would just not let anyone through and it would be sending it on everybody. But, it seems like he's just getting his confidence in the Red Bull. And let's not forget, I think that had it not been for the safety car, he could have, due to the strategy, maybe ended up ahead of Verstappen.
Yeah, that would have been
unlikely, but it could be one of the scenarios. It would be a talking point for sure. So yeah, he was P9 in the end, which is
Yeah.
as you said, first points for him in the Red Bull, and it's the first non-Max Verstappen points for Red Bull since Las Vegas last year.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it has been a one-man show.
Yeah.
Kind of. Also in terms of, which is makes it even more impressive that Red Bull, is kind of up there. Well, not really up there in the constructors, but definitely ahead of Ferrari at the moment.
Unfortunately.
By almost 20 points.
Yeah, the Ferrari seems to be very inconsistent because if you look at the stints of the Ferrari, right, like you could see that when both the Ferraris, especially Hamilton, when they switched on to the fresh medium tires in the second stint, they just came alive. They were overtaking cars, setting the fastest laps. And, Leclerc was quicker than Norris, even though the tire difference wasn't that huge. It was only a few laps, I think, to Norris. But still, there was a glimmer of hope, which I hope that, even Leclerc said that the new floor should carry over to Jeddah a bit more.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's the step in the right direction, because with these news, you just cannot, you just can't read into it. Many sources say it's underperforming. Many sources say it's as expected.
Yeah.
Different sources say it's got to take time. So I guess this is one of the disadvantages you have with starting a new F1 season with a completely different car concept when it's the end of the current rules. So yeah, I think there will be more from Ferrari to come, but still, I think the race was pretty exciting even for the Tifosi fans.
Yeah. No, I mean, as you said, there is still some hope as well for the future races, because at least it seems like the development is going in the right direction.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that continues, because who knows? Again, last year, after 4 races, who would have thought that McLaren would be the ones dominating by the end? Not saying that the same thing necessarily has to happen here, but Mercedes, for example, as well. They're right now they're the next best thing after McLaren. So
seems like it. Yeah,
they find a little more in the car, and they're going to be fighting for wins. And let me tell you, when Antonelli gets that first win, which I would not be very surprised if that would be this season, that's going to be very exciting, I think.
Yeah, and also for the fans, right? Because that's the signs of new blood coming in. Because we've had a lot of drivers coming in with a lot of promise and having been destroyed either by the team of Red Bull or, by different fortunes. But Mercedes seems to be very consistent, especially in the hands of George Russell, who has been doing a great job. He's been very good in qualifying, very good in the race trim. He outsmarted Lando Norris as well, even though he had a lot of issues. Maybe even at one point the dash was supposed to not to work. He kind of baited Norris to go round the outside, and then he just kind of pushed him off. Even in the cooldown room, that was quite funny too.
Yeah,
it was quite a good podcast to listen to. But the Mercedes was fairly confident in their top speed this weekend. Seemed like a very hard car to overtake, which maybe in comparison to the previous years, has been quite unusual. And by some, the Mercedes car has been basically marked as the most stable one out of all the cars, which, when you look at the performance, it's very consistent from corner to corner, which I think if they start to pile on those upgrades, performance upgrades, they should be on their way. But I think this is, again, very track dependent, And McLaren, yet I think they still are the strongest one on every single circuit so far.
I mean, we'll have to see how that develops into the next 2 races. But I think our predictions, well, at least mine, did not end up being as true as I would have hoped. Well, I mean, we had enough action as it was, but I was predicting some more drama within the teams. Because I said there would be some team order drama, and that was mainly because I thought that the McLarens would qualify first and second, which ended up not being the case. And most of the teammates were actually quite far apart.
Yeah.
So we didn't really get the chance to see that. So not a success for me. But how did your prediction end up?
Well, my prediction didn't go as great. I mean, I'm happy it didn't because I predicted that the McLarens will have a dominant weekend in terms of, and I clearly specified that they would have to get a 1-2 in qualifying, 1-2 in the race.
Oh, yeah.
I'm happy they didn't, but we kind of did see a dominant performance from one of the McLaren drivers. But yeah, didn't quite get that right. So we only had Piastri very close to doing a Grand Slam. But yeah, I mean, at one point, maybe, no, okay, anyways, I think Leclerc was leading at one point.
Yeah.
So he would have not gotten it anyway. I'm not sure if he got the fastest lap, but yeah, he was close. He was close, and that would be very impressive.
So what do you think that Jeddah is going to bring? Are you putting your money on McLaren again, hoping that both of them?
I'm going to go a different direction.
Qualify?
And I'm going to say that we are going to see a battle for the win and within the last 5 laps of the race. So, I think that because this year so far, even though we've enjoyed Bahrain Grand Prix like to the maximum, I think we're yet to see this season a proper battle for the lead, and more so a one that would end within the last 5 laps of the race. So I'm sticking to that. Jeddah is very famous, for and known for the DRS games that we've seen with Hamilton and Verstappen in 2021. We've seen it with Leclerc and Verstappen in 2022. So, I'm expecting a lot from Jeddah again. Hopefully, I'm not going to be disappointed. So, what about you, Tonda? How are you feeling? What's your crystal ball prediction for
crystal ball?
Jeddah?
Well, I mean, clearly we lost the magic touch for predictions. They were very accurate last year, if you remember. But I will say that, I will guess that the scales of fate will tip in the other direction for the Dutch world champion, and we will see Max Verstappen on the podium.
Oh, okay.
Getting up there again.
That's solid. That is a solid prediction, because for Jeddah, I'm quite concerned about Red Bull, because it's very dependent on the front end of the car. And we know that Red Bull has been struggling a little bit with it for the last maybe few races, maybe even last season. But maybe they will surprise us again, like they did in Japan, because in Japan seemed to be a front-limited track as well to an extent, and they delivered. So even Australia, front-limited track, we know it. And Verstappen was again right there, P2. So
exactly. We
just hope it's going to be a good race, but getting back to our Bahrain Grand Prix, who would you select as your top driver of the weekend?
I mean, it's becoming a bit cliche at this point to select the driver to win. But I think you can't say anything wrong, anything that Piastri did wrong this weekend. And I think that, especially considering that this was his fourth Grand Prix win only. And the way that he was driving, you would have thought that he has at least 10 under his belt. With the confidence and assuredness. His drink didn't work, but he managed to push through that as well. So I have to say Piastri.
Yeah, it is very hard to argue against that one, because we haven't seen weekends like this, from him yet, because he's on the very start of his career pretty much, So it's just been very good to see him perform like this. And, this is something that many people talked about, with Lando Norris. This is what they expect from him at this point. And Oscar Piastri just stole the baton from him and said, look, I'm the number one driver right now. And Lando Norris was absolutely crushed. When you look at his interviews, when you look him up on the post-qualifying, he's saying, feels like never driven an F1 car before. strange comments, but hopefully he'll regain his confidence back and we will get a proper title fight, not only between teammates, but maybe other drivers as well.
Yeah, I was going to say even before that it did seem like Oscar Piastri was one of the only ones having a good time this weekend.
Yeah.
Especially Lando was a bit disappointed with his qualifying, and the Ferrari also a bit, right? But Oscar, the only problem he had was couldn't have the water. You couldn't have the drink.
Yeah. He seems like he's really channeling his Kimi Raikkonen.
Yeah.
And his facial expressions, his radio expressions, he's a very calm and collected person, seems like, which, in the game of Formula 1 seems to be helping a lot. He didn't have a meltdown in Japan, when he wasn't led by Lando Norris through. He tried to overtake him, I think he's maturing a lot as well in terms of his driving.
Yeah.
Last year's weaknesses of not being able to manage the tires so well seem to be, he seems to be really improving with every race, but we'll see in Jeddah. What about your bottom field driver of the week? And I feel like this one is still pretty difficult because
there's a lot of options.
Good drives. Yeah.
I mean, there's just only so many people that you can choose. I mean, who knows what even qualifies at the bottom field. I mean, because obviously Pierre Gasly, if we consider Alpine bottom field because they didn't score any points so far, then that's an obvious choice for me. But if not him for the qualifying performance, then Ollie Behrman, he taking it from P20 to P10, just showing that as even all the rookies have been doing.
Yeah, they've been doing a stellar job. Even Isaac Hadjar, even though he didn't have probably the most amazing race of his short career, he's still been doing really well. Gabriel Bortoleto, very difficult for him because, he's in a Sauber and it's very difficult to try and do something with that. However, as you mentioned, I think for us, we need to consider the top driver of the weekend. We will select it from the top 4 teams. Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari. Bottom field, anybody other than that. So, yeah, I agree completely with Pierre Gasly. I think he had a stellar drive.
Yeah.
But I'm going to mention a driver that is Esteban Ocon. Because, he had a very solid strategy as well. Because he had a 2-stop strategy, but he boxed very early in the race. He was one of the first to pit. And he managed to keep a Red Bull behind him. Like, although he was on the hard tires, it was still very impressive how he was defending against Verstappen. So from winning it in the qualifying to actually scoring good points, I think that's very impressive no matter where he started, So, yeah, I think you cannot go wrong between Gasly, Behrman, Ocon. They all did great drives. So amazing stuff from our Formula 1 drivers this weekend.
Very nice. And who would you say was the biggest winner for you this weekend?
I think the biggest winner, to go a little bit against the flow again, I'm going to say Alpine.
Yeah.
Because they went into the weekend without scoring points, being on the verge on a few occasions, seemingly not, lacking the pace. And, being on merit, actually qualifying, P5, becoming P4 later. I think that's a big boost. And actually they weren't, Gasly wasn't falling down the field like a rock, Like when we were used to this years ago where there was an odd occasion where for example, you had the Kevin Magnussen, pole position in Brazil. He didn't manage to even score a podium, right? So I think it was very encouraging for the Alpine team to see not only that Esteban Ocon, he wishes. Not only Pierre Gasly putting it up there and being able to actually race the Alpine with the top drivers, but it was also Jack Doohan, spoken about being replaced by the one and only Franco, the Argentinian Colapinto. I think he proved that he can race very well, and he qualified into Q3. He was, I think, P11, so he didn't qualify into Q3, but I think he had a amazing Grand Prix weekend as well, overshadowed maybe by the safety car and not scoring points. But Alpine, for me, biggest winners, scoring their first points.
I mean, it's hard to argue with that.
What about you, Tonda?
But on the other hand, I will go completely with the flow and just straight up say that the biggest winner was Oscar Piastri.
Absolutely.
And, not just in terms of actually winning the Grand Prix, but also in terms of solidifying, I think, his position as a, real title contender this year.
Yeah.
Because obviously, he spent a lot of his time at McLaren so far playing second fiddle to Lando Norris. And we already talked about this, in the last few episodes, that he's really getting into the flow, into his flow, and performing on the flawlessly at times. So I think this was a very solid race, from him in the sense of showing his capabilities. The fact that he's capable of winning and leading races and qualifying first, and then going on to win them. So I think Oscar Piastri in my eyes. But what about the other side, and that is the biggest loser/losers?
Yeah, the biggest loser/losers. I think if I'm going to have to pick one, I'd say Carlos Sainz.
Yeah.
Because, on one hand, it's difficult because they can still take away that, Carlos Sainz made a huge step forward in the Williams. So I'm kind of tilted into saying Sainz and Williams because, Williams seemed to be pretty promising, and I predicted them. That was actually my second prediction, if you remember from the last weekend. I predicted them that they would beat one of the top team drivers. At least one of the drivers of the Williams would beat at least one of the top team drivers, either in qualifying and in the race. So it did happen in the qualifying. Carlos Sainz did beat Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari in qualifying, but the race kind of unfolded in a way that maybe they didn't want to, because Carlos Sainz, a lot of promise in terms of the pace, very good. But yeah, putting that dent into the cost cap once again with damage, costing them a good amount of money for next year's car.
Yeah.
Hopefully not that expensive as last year's floor changes, but still nonetheless, I think they came out empty-handed, so a little bit maybe underwhelming for what it seemed like they had the pace for. So who would you say are the biggest losers of the 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix?
I mean, I think I will have to go ahead and agree with you on this one, because I was thinking the same thing. I would say Williams as a whole, obviously not the greatest weekend for the whole team, who has been performing very solidly in the first 3 races, all been scoring in every single race. But now, this was just a sign of, maybe not. It's not as bright and amazing for the team as it seemed so far. Qualifying for Albon, race for Sainz, being on the back foot again, as a whole, the team.
Yeah,
I think that's something they'll have to deal with now.
Maybe they'll bounce back, in Jeddah. Historically, I think it was a relatively good track for Williams, but used to be a lot because of the top speeds of Jeddah as well, I think. So we will see how it's just, whatever we remember from last year could be thrown out the window for this year. But I think Jeddah is one of the exciting ones because, the DRS gives you so much speed. It just gives you a lot of lap time. So it will be very crucial to stay within the DRS zones. So, yeah, I agree. Williams is gonna be wanting to bounce back. And Tonda, it's now time to rate the 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix. And I'm really curious what your rating will be for this weekend race.
I feel like if we go back and look at all of our ratings, we'll find that we're wildly inconsistent. Probably.
Very.
But I feel like just in the context of coming from the last race in Japan and that being a snooze fest.
Yeah.
And us giving it a 2.5, I feel like with this race we were solid 7 or 8, at least in my eyes. Maybe some more battles at the top would make it a bit stronger, but at least a 7.5, 8, I would say. What would you rate it?
I agree. Like my initial thought is 8 because
yeah,
it had a lot of action. The only thing missing, as you perfectly pointed out, is the battle for the lead. It just never seemed in doubt.
Yeah,
that Oscar Piastri is going to win. He just controlled the race, start to finish. But the fact that there was so much going on anywhere bar the P1 spot thing was so exciting. And the other thing that was taking away a little bit was maybe the chaos when it came to, the timings and the direction and maybe Russell's car kind of malfunctioning. So, but all in all, if I was to see this race the day after the Japanese Grand Prix, I would have shouted it's a 10. Yeah. So it's very much about the context, but yeah, a solid A in my books.
I agree. But let's hope that the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix can bring even more excitement with a battle for the lead, as you predicted in the last 5 laps. And who knows, maybe we'll see Max Verstappen back up there. Maybe Oscar Piastri will double down on his claim for, trying for the championship title, or Lando Norris will give an answer, or somebody completely new.
Yeah.
But we just have to stay tuned and we get excited for the final part of this triple header. And
absolutely. We are reaching the end of this triple header, and let's hope that we will not be met with the typical way of scoring points for the triple header of the Ferraris. So anything more than a 0 will be more than welcome. Let's hope it's more than that, but yeah, let's have some fun, Let's enjoy the racing. Let's appreciate Formula 1, and we will see you after the Grand Prix in Jeddah.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.